I'm Mariette DiCristina. I'm the Dean of the College of Communication here at Boston University. I'm also a COM alum and the parent of a recent BU grad. And I'm delighted to welcome you to today's virtual event, How to Navigate the Job Search During the Time of COVID-19, Advice from Alums to Recent Grads. This event is being recorded. It's also being live streamed through Facebook. This is part of a series of events that COM has been running through the spring Zoom, bringing together experts to talk about how professionals are approaching communications in a world shaped by the coronavirus. In a moment, I'll read the speaker bios, and then Patrick Nelson, our head of career services, will moderate. Please remember to put your questions in the Q&A, which is down at the bottom of the screen, not in the chat. And I hope we have a little fun after the speakers have shared some thoughts with us. We'll turn to the questions, so please feed them in as you have them. And now let me just introduce the speakers. I'm going to read their bios. Rachel Alembakis is a COM journalism and CAS political science grad from 1999, who's founder and managing editor of the Sustainability Report, a weekly digital publication reporting on how environmental, social, and governance issues are integrated into investment and corporate strategies. She started her career after BU at the Associated Press and the Eagle Tribune before moving to Europe and becoming a financial journalist, and has lived in Australia for the past 14 years. In addition to being a proud COM alum, she also holds a Master of Science in Politics of the World Economy from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Welcome, Rachel. Next, I'd like to introduce Taryana Gilbeau, who graduated from COM and PR in 2014. She serves as the coordinator in UTA's Inclusion Department. She joined UTA in 2017, working in learning and development, where she helped run the Agent Trainee and Internship Program, which included orienting more than 200 trainees annually to the agency. Originally from Los Angeles and Atlanta, Gilbeau graduated from Boston University with a Bachelor of Science in Public Relations and a minor in Chinese language in 2014. Welcome, Taryana.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to welcome Colleen McCreary, who graduated from COM with a communication degree in 1995. Colleen currently serves as the Chief People Officer of Credit Karma, responsible for all talent operations and communications for the company. With over 20 years of experience in human resources, Colleen has served as the senior people leader for Vivo, Cigna, and the Climate Corporation. She also served as a technical advisor for HBO TV show Silicon Valley. Welcome to you, Colleen.
Thanks.
So now I'm delighted to turn it over to Pat Nelson, who is the director of the COM Career Services Program. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Mariette. Welcome, everyone. Colleen, Rachel, Taryana, can't thank you enough for being here. Two quick items before we get started. We do have the Q&A function ready to go, and we'll be monitoring that throughout the panel. Additionally, we will leave time at the end, about 15 minutes or so, for questions if you want to wait until that time period. But please feel free to raise some questions as they come along in our time. And secondly, some of our panelists have a hard stop right at 5 p.m. as they're joining us from around the world. I think Rachel, where's everybody joining us from today? Rachel's down under, I believe.
Yep, I'm in Melbourne, Australia. Yep.
And Colleen and Taryana, I believe you're both on the West Coast.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm in San Francisco.
And yep. I'm in Los Angeles.
In LA. So their work day, Rachel's is just beginning, and Colleen and Taryana is still going on when this comes over. So we'll stop hard at 5, but hopefully we'll cover a lot of ground between now and then. As you all know, it's been a very difficult time for all of us with our professional lives and those looking to further theirs. You know, it's been especially hard on graduating seniors and alumni and anyone looking to improve their way into the workforce. I wanted to start with asking you all, what are your companies currently doing internally to assess your needs in terms of jobs or internships? There's been so many unknowns for students and grads entering the job force, and it's very valuable perspective for them, I think, to understand what companies are dealing with internally during these unknown times. so that they know best as to how to direct their efforts. So how has your process changed, and why do you think, why has it changed, and how do you think students can best navigate this uncertainty with employers?
Well, no, I can't.
We can start with, how about Colleen? Would you like to start?
Sure, happy to start.
Thank
So, I think every company is obviously very different depending on the industry that you're in, what you're facing, the economic situation, what your footprint is around the world. So, sort of how you've been affected. We as a company internally sent the first email about COVID in January, and we have no presence in Asia. So it wasn't necessarily in response to that, but just sort of from a public health starting to recognize things were changing. And we do have offices across the United States and then in the United Kingdom. And it was really much like turning a dial versus flipping a switch. It wasn't all of a sudden everything is closed and shut down. It was, as we were starting to get data, we were making decisions as to the safety of our employees, what made the most sense. Obviously, for those who are in cities where public transportation puts you at higher risk versus people who are getting in cars every day. And even the return to work is, potentially going to be the same way, where we expect it will be that same turning a dial versus, all of a sudden everybody comes back. How it affected our employment scenario was actually quite different. So our company, just to give a little context, is in the middle of being acquired. And so, which we had just announced at the last week of February. And we're still going through a whole government review with that. So we already had a lot of uncertainty, I think, amongst our employee population with that. And then when we sort of went into the COVID crisis in the United States in particular, our business model is directly connected to the financial industry, which unfortunately, due to past experiences, if you went through 2008 and 2009, at the time that people tend to need access to cash and liquidity most is the time that banks tend to tighten. And so our business has been very heavily affected in terms of revenue sources and things like that. And so we've had to make some pretty tough calls. We are doing some very selective hiring still. We implemented pay cuts, so no one lost their jobs, but we did do a sliding scale across all of the employees, so everybody sort of took shared pain. We actually redeployed about 60 employees, so our whole recruiting team, and as well as a lot of our creative and performance marketing, because we turned off a lot of our marketing channels. We redeployed them to other jobs throughout the company. We did honor all of our internships, so all of our interns are onboarding. Right now, we sent them their laptops. We have all virtual onboarding scenarios for full-time, and we also honored all of our new grad offers as well. So in our case, we're willing and able to accommodate everybody based on our financial lens, but I do know, sort of as I started out, like it's very different depending on the company to company.
Got it. Thank you, Colleen. Taryana?
Yeah, it's actually very similar to Colleen's situation. So I'll kind of back in, I work at an entertainment talent agency, and to give some background on what that is and how we make money, we represent clients in all different spaces, whether it be music, TV production, writers, social media stars, and a number of other different spaces in the entertainment world. And when our clients make money, that's when we make money. And so, as many people know, the entertainment industry has been hit extremely hard. All of our live shows, so anybody we represented in the music space, in the comedy space, all of those shows had to stop immediately once this COVID-19 became, extremely real in the US and across the world. And so that definitely hit our company hard, and many other agencies hard as well. And then also, all production stopped. So any movie that was in production, any TV that was in production, all of those things had to come to a halt, which really hurt our business. And so we also had to make some really tough decisions. And what we heard and what I appreciated about the company is that every decision that we had to make was due to, making sure that in the long term, we're still here and we're still back and we're better than and stronger than we are right now, so that we can continue to hire amazing people and thrive as a company. So we recently, after taking a number of different actions, had to furlough a number of our employees. And, for us, that was the best decision, because unlike a layoff, they were still able to stay socially connected, retain their benefits, and still apply for unemployment. And the hope is really to bring all of those employees back when everything kind of goes back to whatever our new normal looks like. We also implemented kind of an internal staffing agency to redirect some of our employees to other departments, because we do have a social media department who represents Instagram stars, and they're actually thriving right now, and they're a little overwhelmed. And so we weren't able to redeploy employees, and we are trying to figure out creative ways to retain as many people as possible. But we are also doing a hiring freeze right now. I will say, for anybody who is interested in our entry-level programs, such as our trainee program or our internship program, we still are doing informational interviews, so that when things get better, we're ready. And we really want to hire people as soon as possible. So that is still something that we are doing to keep our pipeline warm. But right now, we really are focused on trying to maintain the long-term health of our company.
Great. Thank you. And Rachel, anything you can add in that regard? I know they both touched on quite a bit.
Yeah, really similar situation here in Australia. The company that I work for focuses on the financial services industry here in Australia, which is one of the largest industries in our country. I would say that we're looking at this as a pause, and it's sort of a defensive, as Taryana said, sort of a defensive moment to guarantee the long-term health of the company, as opposed to a shrinking down. But through this time, there's been a new marketing intern that started with the company, which has been great for me because I've been working with her. So I would say the outlook here is cautious, but hopeful for the long term.
Right. And I think that's great for students to hear and grads to hear. The insight is very valuable, I think, and knowing that, even under excellent scenario or a strong job market, there's a lot going on internally that you just don't know when you're going through that application process. And that has just completely evolved at this point in time. So knowing the intricate levels of uncertainty and what companies are doing right now to get through their own day-to-day, I think is very valuable for applicants to have. So I think patience is a good word to use for students and grads. In that regard, they're very eager to get going and get through this time period. What do you think you would do if you were in their shoes? How do you differentiate yourself as a candidate during these times? What are productive ways to show an employer when the market turns around, when opportunities pick up? This is how I use my time. This is what I did pertinent to my field to better myself as a candidate. Maybe we can start with you, Rachel.
Oh, that's a great question, Pat. So I'd say, look, I work for a fairly specialized portion of the financial journalism industry. I would say more broad-based, what I'd love to see is, continued work on the resume. Journalism's multimedia these days. It's gone to the days where it's just print journalism all the way. I would love to see skills, sort of across, audio, visual, podcasting, as well as strong skills in writing. Continuing education is always impressive, and there's so many opportunities to sort of continue brushing up on skills. Any freelance opportunities that you can possibly, hustle up through now, although, freelance budgets are often the first in the firing line in my industry, but anything where you can show that you're continued to be invested, that you're continuing to augment your skills and increase your knowledge base is going to impress me a heck of a lot.
Sure.
Definitely, I would add the same thing. I think the first thing I thought of was, if I was in their position, I would be updating everything: LinkedIn, resume, if I had a blog, if I had a portfolio, whatever markets yourself, I would immediately continue to work on that, improve that brush it up, make sure it's up to date. LinkedIn right now is like everyone is pouring there. I've never gotten more messages than I have now. And I think right now they're offering premium for free. And so if you can upgrade your account right now, that would be fantastic. I think Rachel also talked about, continuing your education. I've seen a lot of online classes that are either discounted or free. And even if it isn't a formal, getting your master's degree, is it, learning how to do graphic design? Is it learning data analytics? Is it learning, editing skills? Like that would be impressive to me if somebody said, I graduated with a PR degree and then I used that time to actually learn a brand new skill that I can bring to your company, which I think would be an amazing time to learn something like that. I think also, it really depends. There are some students who I know, they graduate and they need a job right now for a number of different reasons. And I think for those students, I would say, if you can't find a job, your dream job or your dream career, mentally prepare to pivot and know that pivoting is okay. And that if you're not going into your dream industry right now, that's fine. And as an employer, I know that if I see a resume and it doesn't exactly line up, if you're a 2020 grad, I understand that you had to do what you had to do. Even right now, looking at like staffing agencies, I would see how they're doing. For creatives, there are also staffing agencies that, are hiring online writers and things like that. And so I would look into those resources. But I would also say, any job is going to get you experience. So I wouldn't limit yourself. I would really have an open mind, knowing that, this next year, your life or a couple years, it's just a journey and finding yourself. And so really have fun with it, enjoy it, be patient, like you said, Patrick, but use your resources, make sure that first you're mentally okay, because that's the most important. But when you feel like you can go ahead and be creative and try to find something that will, keep you learning.
Excellent advice. Colleen, anything to add? It's pretty good so far.
I think Taryana and Rachel have done a great job of sort of capturing a lot of the key points. I think there are a couple of other things. One is most people don't find their dream job right out of college, so You're not actually any different than everybody. And if you had asked me when I first graduated, either from BU or my master's degree, I would not have predicted that I ended up where I am now. Like that just would have never been on my radar. So part of it is I say, you want to learn to say yes more than you say no. It's a huge piece of advice. So when people say, would you be open to discussing this opportunity or that opportunity? Normally I say, always have the cup of coffee. Now I would say, always have the virtual cup of coffee. Be open to things that that might not have been on your list before. Secondly, I would say you need to learn to sort of get over fear and ego. Because a lot of people are very nervous and scared of the actual like networking part. I hate networking, and I was a recruiter for a long time. So I got to tell you, like the cold network is that I hate it, but this is the time to do it. And do not worry at all. Like this is the time to work hey, you're 2 links down from my friend or my parents' friends or my neighbor's friends or whatever, like get the word out, like let people know. And that connects to the ego point, which is there's going to be a lot of empathy right now. And that's going to be a huge leg up for you on your situation. People want to help you. And that is something that you don't always see. And so I think you should really strike where sort of while the iron is hot on this and take advantage of like, hey, I just graduated. I'm super motivated. I have a lot of opportunity. I really want to make this work, but you're going to have to actually do those things. And there are a lot of industries that are hiring. And I think, especially in the communication side, the overhead right now of internal communications is massive. So there are probably a lot of companies who are looking for either internship help or even temporary help right now to help with that load in ways that they never even imagined. And then I think the other piece is there are a lot of nonprofits that really need the help right now as well. And just being available and putting your skills out there. Sometimes they don't even know what you can do. And so stepping up to the plate in that way is going to really help you.
Yeah. I would love to just add one more point. Other industries that, thinking about the entertainment industry, although we are hit very hard, I always tell people, if you really want to do entertainment right now, look into streaming companies like Netflix, Hulu. They are still hiring. So, I think it's really important right now for graduates to look at the trends and to see what industries are doing okay or excelling right now. Digital marketing, if you look at like social media companies, those are the industries right now within the entertainment space that are doing really well. And so I would definitely look into those industries to see what is available, because I know they are looking for people. Or even tech, which has a lot of similarities with entertainment, a lot of overlap, even thinking about like Amazon and Amazon Studios and how that overlaps into both of those worlds. Definitely look into things like that.
Excellent.
Could I just reiterate a point that Taryana made earlier about a job is a job, and it's a great way to leverage skills. I think one of the benefits of coming from a communications background is the fact that we have broad-based skills that we can leverage, that we've learned through the classroom, that we've learned in internships and work experience through the way. And speaking as someone who's now in a position to look at resumes in future, I wouldn't be turned off in the slightest to see someone who's gone in a slightly different direction, gone for an internal communications position first before applying for a journalism degree. In fact, I might actually see it as a value add, in that I know that you have experience in a different industry and you've gained skills that I might not have and that I'm looking for if I'm augmenting a team. So don't be afraid to step outside. A narrow discipline, go for something broad-based. And as Colleen said, none of us are exactly where we maybe envisaged when we were walking across the stage or getting our diplomas.
Right. And Rachel, I can't thank you enough for that perfect segue into my next topic. I was on a webinar recently with hundreds of career professionals, and they were talking about the skills that companies are now valuing more so than what they previously would value. And the top two that they mentioned were communication and adaptability. And so that, we're all remote now. We can't walk down the hall to communicate with our coworkers or even shoot an email and expect to get it answered by the end of the day to some regard. There's an extra emphasis, it sounds simple, but on being able to craft a concise email or navigate these Zooms or teleconferences appropriately. And in terms of adapting, self-managing your time and being, self-reliant. What skills do you think, I know Rachel, you said you brought on a marketing intern. Colleen, you've done some targeted spotty hiring here and there. Are you hiring for the role just as much as you hired for before in these instances, or are you looking for an added emphasis on any certain areas that are now crucial during this time where we're all working remote?
I don't think we've really changed how we've hired in general. I think the same skills that you're mentioning are the skills that in any industry that's changing quite a bit. So I've spent the last 20 years in technology. We're changing all the time. So sort of dealing with ambiguity and adaptability have always been the top of the list, and people who are comfortable outside of the normal structure and hierarchy tend to do better in tech. So for us, this is just an extension of sort of innovating and having to be creative. And we've had a company goal this year around velocity and how quickly we can work and how productive we can be together. And we just had to innovate at the same time. And I think you're seeing that from a lot of companies and even the small businesses and how they've had to, in order to survive, all of those entrepreneur skills sort of come out. And I think that sort of is just universal. And we're seeing, I would imagine, more traditional companies, this is probably a bigger shock to the system than sort of the industry that I'm in. But certainly the ability to connect with someone in any form or fashion and being able to do that in a way that implies the correct tone and sort of sends the appropriate amount of urgency, and how do you do that in this environment, has become, sort of much of a more developed skill than we've seen in a long time.
Rachel, Taryana, anything to add in that regard?
Not particularly. I wouldn't say that
Same.
necessarily we're looking for anything extra now through COVID that we wouldn't be looking for normally.
Okay. Great. We briefly touched on networking. And I know, Colleen, you said you hate networking, and it's been a big part of your career. Networking has definitely evolved during this time as well. And I think there's even greater emphasis for students and grads to connect with alums and network in order to gain that perspective and see what's going on internally. Taryana, you said you've been getting a ton of messages on LinkedIn and other mediums. Is there a right way to do it? What do you prefer? What do you see as something, a student or alum reaching out to you and you say, oh, I can deliver on that right now? What is the right way to do it?
Yeah. So personalization, I would say, is the number one thing. As somebody who works within our HR department, I receive a lot of messages, and there's a difference between, someone reaching out and saying, I'm looking for a job, can you help me? And
Right.
someone who, messages me and says, I see on your profile that you work in diversity and inclusion, and that's something that I'm really interested in. Do you have 5 minutes to talk to me? Just to tell me about your job. I think taking the time out to read somebody's profile before you message them, because you can find out a lot of information there. And it's funny because when preparing for the panel, I was talking to our recruiters specifically, who they receive probably triple the amount of things that I receive. And they say, the number one thing that people mess up on is, they see that I'm a recruiter for UTA, but they don't realize that all of our recruiters have specialties. And so we have recruiters who only recruit for very senior roles, and we have other recruiters who just focus on entry-level positions. And so if somebody's messaging somebody, a recruiter who only recruits, at an executive level, saying, I'm looking for an internship, they're like, you didn't even take the time to read what I do.
Sure.
I think right now is also the perfect time to draw on things that you have in common. Be it, we both went to Boston University, we were both in the same sorority, we were both in this club, we both have the same hometown, like anything. Whenever I see that someone, they have something in common with me, that automatically I'm probably going to respond.
Absolutely.
If you're a fellow Terrier, I'm likely going to respond. And so I think it's very smart for people to bring that up. Again, you have to imagine that the people that you are reaching out to are getting hit with a lot of different messages. So you really want yours to stand out, and you want your ask to be reasonable. And I think right now it's reasonable to ask for, informational interviews to learn about different positions. It's reasonable to ask, I'm unsure what to do within, this COVID-19 world. I'm wondering if you have some advice to get me to the next step. I think Colleen, said earlier, empathy is at an all-time high right now. And so I think if you just take a little bit of time to just personalize your message, I think you will receive a lot. I also think if you send a message out to 30 people, know that maybe 10 or 15 are going to respond. So you can't just send a message out to 3 people and then just sit and wait. You have to make sure that you are actually putting in the time and effort to reach out to a lot of people. And I promise you that people will respond to you.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think there's certainly a targeted approach. I think students and grads don't want to reach out to companies or people that aren't really, realistically involved in a field or career that they would be interested in. You want to make sure that you're using their time to the best degree possible, and you don't want to waste your time either. So I also always preach to students, to put some research into it. Unfortunately, a big part of it's research, but if you spend the time looking into the geographic markets and your target employers that you'd like to go to, and actually compile that list of the 10, 15 employers that you want to focus on, then you'll end up somewhere that's much more informed, much more realistic, and somewhere you'd probably be longer than you would otherwise. Anything to add, Rachel or Colleen, on the networking part?
I mean, I think this is the time to really as I was saying earlier, to reach out to the networks that you probably wouldn't always think to reach out to.
Right.
So, you know, use your friends, use your family, get the word out there. I think that as I said before, people are looking for ways to help. Part of the challenge, though, sometimes is they don't know how to help. So if you don't do what Taryana and Patrick are telling you, which is do some homework ahead of time on what the ask would be, then they can know better. Oh, I don't work in that department, or I don't work in that industry, but I do know this other person. I always tell people the way that I can be most valuable to them. And this is oftentimes for senior executives. So this is not even just people in their entry level. This will span your whole career, which is go into my LinkedIn network and then see if there is somebody that you would like an introduction to, or a company that you're fascinated with that I know. Then I can better help you, because asking me to do that homework for you, it's just going to drop to the bottom of the to-do. Like, I probably would be well-intentioned to want to try and help, but I'm, you know, time-wise, life-wise, those kinds of things. But if you were to already do the homework and come to me and say, hey, I've been looking at these companies and it looks like you know these 3 people. Is there a way you can do an introduction for me? That's going to go, you know, miles further to actually getting done and helping you out.
Absolutely. Having a concrete ask in mind. I think anytime when I talk to students about this, there's often a hesitation, and they often feel bad reaching out and don't want to be a bother. But it's part of the process, and so much has moved online, and you know, no one likes networking, but it's one of those things that the more you do it, the better you get at it and the more results you see from it. So if you have, you know, like you said, Taryana, you start with, you know, in your cold call, so to speak, via LinkedIn, saying, hi, you know, I noticed you graduated from COM in 2012. I'll be graduating this spring. It looks like we're also in the same sorority. You know, I'm really looking to begin my career in entertainment in Los Angeles this summer, and I was wondering if you had advice or perspective as to how to differentiate my candidacy. Something short and concise like that, I think, is probably what students can benefit from doing the most. Anything to add on that, Rachel? I know you said that was pretty well covered.
Yeah, I think, you know, look, the one thing I'd say to your students and to all of our now fellow COM alum is that, yeah, look, most of us are here and we would like to help. As Taryana said, you know, I'm delighted to hear from BU grads. I've got a real fondness for my alma mater. Don't presume that you're being a burden.
Right.
We've all 3 of us, all of us on this panel have been in that position where we're hustling for that first position. And look, I'm one of the weird ones. I don't mind networking. You know, it's part of the job skill. You know, going out, as a journalist, you're contacting people all the time, and you're asking what can frequently be really intrusive questions.
Sure.
So if you can't, you know, find a way to find a specific research to ask, you're not leveraging your great skills and the things that you've learned during your time at Boston University. So don't be afraid. More likely than not, we're going to be receptive, and better and more tailored your ask can be, the more likely that we can help you with what we've assembled ourselves.
Exactly. And Colleen, as you said, having that concise ask, doing the homework, doing the research, and saying, here's the one discrete thing that I need help with, instead of saying, hey, do you know some good companies I should be speaking with? You figure that out on your own. Come to us with the concise ask, and that will get you, like you said, light years further than otherwise. Great. Taryana, you've had a lot of experience spending time developing internship programs. Do you see this process changing in light of the current situation and being aware of the new normal now and how internships will work? Has there been discussion of, you know, say when the fall rolls around and things are hopefully more stable, do you think there's going to be an expectation of more remote online interns, or are you hoping to bring people back in the building?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of question marks, more questions than answers right now. We are all hopeful that, you know, as sooner than later we can bring people back, but we just don't know. And right now, safety really is the #1 concern. And I think, you know, if we decide to hire tomorrow, we don't want to then have to turn around and then, have to let people go. So we really want to make sure that when we're bringing on new people, that we really are in a healthy spot. I do think that, work culture in general is going to have to change. In the entertainment industry, we have lots of common spaces. We thrive on, we have 200 plus meetings with people all in one room. We bring in intern class, anywhere from 20 to 50 people. They have an all-day orientation in one auditorium where they're all squeezed in. And so it's definitely going to have to change. What that change is, I'm uncertain, but I do think that we are going to have to relook what our internship program looks like, hopefully for the better. I think this, realizing now we are a 100% remote company now.
Right.
We never thought we'd see the day. I think people would have guessed that, this wasn't going to work, but it's working. And so I think the advantage of that is, flexible work, which in the diversity and inclusion space is something we have been talking about for many, many years. Is, right now or previously, if you had an internship with our company, you needed to come to Los Angeles, New York, or Nashville,
Right.
or our London office. I think it would be really amazing if there was a world where people could, have an internship in a remote and they can do, work from home. Because that is a barrier for a lot of people to have to pick up and move to, for us, unfortunately, fairly expensive cities. And so I think it'd be amazing if we'd be able to widen that funnel and say, we can do internships from wherever. But, I'm unsure what that will look like, but I imagine that that would be a really cool thing. And I do think that remote work will definitely become more frequent and we will see it more often.
Absolutely. And to that point, we wouldn't be able to have an incredible panel like this with 3 people in San Fran, LA, and Melbourne. So it's a good segue into my final question and topic before we get into questions and answers from our guests about the opportunities that now exist that didn't exist any before. What's the silver lining of this process, do you think, in terms of folks looking to change your career path or maybe find a home that might have been more difficult to find previously? Where have you seen or predict seeing opportunity exist right now that didn't exist before? Having more remote offices nationally, more remote employees. Maybe those conversations haven't happened yet, but I'm curious to hear if you're starting to think about, how do we innovate when this is over with our employees?
I actually am a little contrarian to the news cycle on all of this. I think there's a lot more hype than reality. I certainly think there'll be a lot of innovation and people are functioning differently. And as even we've seen small businesses that, maybe potentially refuse to go online for a long time. I don't need to do that. And then all of a sudden here they are. They're,
Right.
sort of, I think we're going to see a lot more in small business than actually we're going to see in large business. But I think you're seeing a lot more of the hyped chatter in the media right now. I look back to, I've been sort of giving people reference points that it takes a long time for actual organizational change to truly happen. We're in a bit of a bubble right now. This is it's a pandemic. Your company survival is at risk. From our internal surveys, and I think, other sort of heads of HR that I've spoken with at other, and I'm in the bubble too of a technology, which is, very easy for us to go and operate, very white collar, everybody's got a laptop, pretty easy to turn it on, wasn't, sort of too traumatic
Right.
of an adjustment. But, we're certainly all in the, hey, we're going to do whatever we need to do right now. I look at, if you just look at like World War II and all of the men went off to war, and for 4 to 6 years, you had women who came into the workplace and did all sorts of jobs. As soon as those men came back, those women were not welcome in the workplace for a very long time after. And that, sort of, I think people are willing to do things outside of the norm when they need to, but the, sort of creatures of habit will come back. I do think we're going to see more flexibility, which is ultimately what people want. I don't think my opinion is the majority of people don't want to be sitting at home all of the time working. I think most people want the flexibility to control their calendars and their lifestyles, but they want a community to be a part of. And it's great that we can sort of open those doors. I also think that, it's a really interesting discussion over, there's, sort of, especially in tech over the last week and a half, like so much of somebody's compensation is connected to geography. Taxes are all connected to where you have employees. So the business taxes and operational taxes, as well as payroll taxes, those are all connected to zip code in some form or fashion around the world. All of your rights and leave privileges and vacations, those are all also connected to geography. So it's really not quite the same. And those are all sort of the business sides that we all tend to forget. And frankly, I think the media, so I'll chastise all you future journalists of sort of getting it wrong for clicks. Like there's just a lot of information. So, I certainly see that we're going to see some more doors open. I also see that there's an opportunity for people to get left behind, which I'm much more concerned about. And I spent a lot more talking about, I do think people who are early in career do better when they are surrounded by people who have experience and they have somebody that they can go to. I think women and people of color in particular could be penalized by this situation, who might not necessarily have all of the support and infrastructure that you need in order to get your career sort of off the ground. So those are some of the conversations that we're having, both with our employee population, but then also sort of, I'm speaking a lot more sort of broadly within the sort of people community to make sure that we're addressing those things.
Okay. Well, thank you for that insight. It's been excellent so far. I think we'll open it up to Q&A right now. We've got about 10, 15 minutes left budgeted. I've had a few questions come in. I'll address these real quick. Some of these are to you individually, some as a group. Taryana, somebody asked, what do you see happening to agent training programs across the industry during this time? I think we've kind of talked about that on the internship program front. I'm sure it's not too different, but how are the agent training programs adjusting right now?
Yes, so it's a great question, and probably the most frequently asked question at agencies, because the agent trainees are the lifeline of our companies. Right. Right now, from my understanding, I believe that most of the major agencies are also doing kind of a pause with the hiring of the agent trainees, especially because a lot of that, those first couple of weeks, are spent in the mailroom or really in-person things. And so right now we are trying to figure out how to innovate that. This is probably not the answer that is they want, but I think it's uncertain right now what that's going to look like, or when those programs will come back. I think right now, as I mentioned earlier, we're still doing informational interviews and there's still ways to engage. And so I would still reach out to those companies, those big agencies, be it my company at UTA, CAA, WME, to really understand what is going on, reach out to people in HR. Again, I think asking the questions, each agency is going to do something different. But the one thing you can guarantee will not happen is they will not go away, because agent trainee programs are how we build our amazing agents. And so we need that program. It's just trying to figure out how we do that safely, and make sure that we do it to fit the new normal in the agency world, because it's going to look a little different than it did before.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure that provides those interested in those programs with some relief, and they're not going anywhere. Do what you can to inform yourself in the meantime. This question, I would think there's great value in this still, as there always is, but in terms of resumes and your candidacy, how much value do you put into volunteer work during this time as well? I mean, like we were talking about earlier, I think, Colleen, you hit on it the most, but any job right now, any work you can do right now, especially when you mentioned nonprofit, is good work right now.
Oh, for certain. I think, sort of showing that you can understand some sort of business or community need and then coming up with a solution is what you're going for. So I don't think it really matters that where and when that sort of skills have happened, but your ability, how did you understand the problem? How did you contribute to a solution? What's the work that you actually did? I had a good friend last year who lost her husband suddenly after 20 years, and she hadn't been in the workforce all that time, but she had homeschooled 3 children. And we took all of her homeschool experience, which was like build it, all of these like project management and all of the things. She used to organize all these trips and stuff like that. We built her a LinkedIn page and she had a job in like 6 weeks. So I think there's just sometimes some creative scenarios, but really all it is like, what skills do you have? And then how are they going to work in our environment? And are you going to, sort of excel? And can I trust you to do that in our environment?
Absolutely. Anyone else want to jump on that too?
Look, 100% lived
Yeah.
experience, no matter whether it's paid or whether it's volunteer,
Yep.
is going to burnish your resume and be able to give you an opportunity to tell a narrative when you front up with a potential employer about what you do and how you accomplish it.
And I know that even BU has been sending out a ton of volunteer opportunities that you can do virtually. So, that is something that there is still a need, whether it's, something that you can make from home, it's, a phone call. There are a ton of ways to volunteer virtually. I think that'd be an amazing thing to do right now.
Great. And we have 2 more questions in the queue here. A lot of what we've talked about has been geared toward graduating students. This question is from an alum who has 30 years experience and was let go in March. Any advice for this alum trying to get back into the field? I imagine some of this is the same in terms of networking and making those conversations, but it's definitely an added challenge for an alum at that level of experience with 30 years in the field to make a transition during this time. Any advice?
Yeah, I think the same. I think it really is very similar. I have spoken to many, many very talented people who've just been let go because of just the economic scenario. This is the highest degree of empathy you're ever going to get. I think this is very reminiscent of sort of 2001 in sort of post 9/11 world where, unfortunately, tens of thousands of people lost their job due to something that had nothing to do with their own performance, their own worlds, and things like that. So you're going to find people are going to be much more empathetic to this scenario and trying to partner with you to help you find the next opportunity. I do think that generally people need to be senior people always have to sort of recheck their ego a little bit sometimes and figure out like, what is my scenario? I work in financial technology, so I tell people very quickly, get real about your financial situation and what you need and what's most important. And then, but understand that this could be a great time to take that 30 years of experience and apply it in a new world in a new way that you never imagined before. And get excited about that. So I definitely am seeing the same thing. I've been saying, a lot of the sort of layoffs and cuts that I've seen. I mean, this is not like some sort of old school GE bottom 5%. This is deep cutting to the bone, really, really critical people who the business just couldn't support it anymore. So I think you got a great narrative right now. I think you have a great opportunity and you're going to find people who probably really want to help.
Great. I think those are all great points. It's a tricky question anytime for our international students that are entering the workforce. Is it cumbersome for companies to sponsor international students right now? And additionally, given COVID-19, what are some ways international students can stand out among applicants?
Yeah, I'm gonna speak to this just at least from the U.S. and the U.K. Where I have sort of more of an understanding. Yeah, it's definitely going to be harder right now, and I will tell you, no matter what your political leanings is, that this current administration is not making it any easier in the United States or frankly even in the U.K. Given what they're going through. For people to find work, I know that there's a lot of concern about the OPT program in particular potentially being cut. I will say I've also been hearing that about the H-4 spousal visa for the last 2 years, and there still hasn't been a trigger pulled. So knock on wood, maybe this is more, sort of smoke than anything else. But it is burdensome, I will tell you. Like, it is definitely a lift for companies to sponsor. It's easier if you are in that OPT or CPT world. So if you're, on an F1, you're on an E3 from Australia. I love those. Those are super easy. If you're on a TN from Canada or Mexico, those are also super, a lot easier. But certainly it is going to be a lift, and I do think that you're going to have to work that much harder to build those connections, and then tell the story as to why you're the best candidate. Just because it will be one of those situations where they're going to have to prove that, sort of you were the most qualified worker relative to whatever pool, and that pool happens to be larger with the unemployment so high right now, depending on the industry. That being said, for me personally as an employer, we do everything we can to protect those workers in any situation. And the idea of someone not just losing their job, but then losing their opportunity to work and live where they want to live is devastating. And so, I think maybe not most, but a lot of employers are very conscientious of the decision. And so I think getting your foot in the door is a really great start. Even taking it as an internship instead of a job for a while, if you can support that, would be, super helpful for you to sort of longer term potentially get through the process. It is, I'm very sorry that it's an unfortunate situation right now. And it's out of the employer's control. And that, I think, is the note.
Right.
Like, there are so many years. I mean, I've been wrestling with the United States government over this for almost 25 years in my career now. I have spoken to many a congressional hearing about the topic of our visa workforce, our immigration, our immigration policy. There's nothing I can do as an employer, nothing other than hiring great attorneys who can help us with the paperwork. There's so much that is really out of our control, that it's unfortunate. So anything that you can do to help your employer sort of navigate that, just by being prepared, making sure you have all your paperwork in order, is probably, sort of one of the easiest ways that you can help yourself out.
Great. And
Not too much more to add to that than Colleen, but I mean, look, borders are closed. Right. You can't come into Australia. As much as I'd love to help a comm alum coming over from the US who wants to experience life in Australia, this is just, we're in unprecedented circumstances. We don't know how long it's going to last. And we don't know what the hiring situation is going to look like. Because similarly, I think, Colleen, you make a great point. It isn't just America. There's also the UK. And in Australia, we have economic nationalistic rhetoric going on as well. So one doesn't know what will happen to immigration programs going forward. I don't want to raise any unrealistic expectations, unfortunately.
Right. And lastly, in the queue, it's a quick question that I might just be able to address. How would you suggest putting the small trainings and things you did during the pandemic on a resume? Would you even put it on a resume? Absolutely. I think you could create or add it to a section toward the bottom of your resume. Leadership, additional activity, skills, certificates, and list it right in there, without a doubt. One last comment here. I don't have a question, but want to thank these panelists for frank, authentic, and still optimistic answers and insights today. And we can't thank you all enough for making the time to be here. If there's any closing remarks you'd like to share, please feel free, but I know we've covered a lot of ground that we had hoped to. Thank you all so much.
Can I just add one thing,
please,
Pat, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
We've all been really optimistic here, and it's been so great hearing from Colleen and Taryana. But I think it's really important to say to people who are listening that, this is a really, really tough time. It's disproportionately affecting young people in early stages of their career. It's disproportionately affecting women. I assume communities of color as well. You're not bad, and you're not wrong, and you're not losing ground if you're struggling right now. We want to be optimistic, and we want to be empathetic and compassionate to you, but there's sometimes a lot of grace in saying to people, you're doing it tough, and it's not your fault.
Yep. Optimistic and realistic at the same time.
Yeah. if you're doing it tough, you're not bad, you're not alone, and you're not bad, and you're not wrong. So I just think it's important to say that as well.
Yeah, 100% agree. You you've already had a tough year. Like I remember when we were getting the emails about what was happening on campus, and me and my other friends who graduated from BU were like, we couldn't imagine what you all have had to go through with having to pick up and leave campus, or some of you went home and then didn't realize you'd never come back. You weren't able to say goodbye. You weren't able to have those celebrations. And so give yourself a break. I kind of touched on this at the beginning, but my number one thing to anybody right now is please take care of yourself, take care of your mental health. If you can't, you have to do that first. And so you will get a job. You will figure this out. You will get to where you want to get. The most important thing right now is that you are healthy, that your loved ones and family and friends are supported, and that you are putting that first. So don't feel this rush. I remember when I graduated, there was this rush to like do something. Like you have to do something right now. And I would say to you that there is no pressure to do anything right now, but take care of yourself, and do whatever feels good. And there are people here who are willing to support you in any way that you need. And that this will get better. We will have maybe not our normal, but there will be a new normal. And we'll get through this. You'll get through this. So know that, like, give yourself a clap, a head, pat on the back, whatever that is. You've already done so much in a pandemic. And so whatever else you do after this will just be extra. So don't worry about it.
Well, Taryana, Mariette, I think that's a great note to end on. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I have to agree. So one thing you also can do is join us at future virtual events. The next one is next week on Wednesday, and it'll be on making binge-worthy programs by using, how research and analytics are shaping today's content. But I just want to say also, give my thanks to the panelists as well. Just to say it was a really wonderful and inspiring conversation. I learned a lot. I learned from Colleen that you want to say yes more than anything else. I love this notion of saying yes. Taryana, I loved your, suggestion not to just sit and wait, but you have to try to do. And Rachel, I loved also your reassurance that although, we BU grads may not have everything you're hoping for right at the minute, we're at least happy to talk with you. And I thought that was wonderful, and I loved your messages. So I want to thank everybody again so much for joining. I hope we'll have a chance to chat again before too long. And I hope everybody has a really lovely day, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you.